you think the funeral home in your town is family-owned, you may be wrong. That sign with the family name on it, the one that has quietly served your community for generations, there is a real chance that family sold the business years ago. It may now belong to a company traded on the stock exchange, worth around $10 billion, one that quietly owns close to 1,500 funeral homes across the country, almost all of which you would swear were local. And here is the part that matters. They kept the old family name on the sign on purpose, so that you would never know you were dealing with a giant corporation at the worst moment of your life. You will not see it on the invoice. You will not see it on the sign. The only place it shows up is on paperwork you would never think to ask for. And if your family has ever put down even a little money toward a funeral in advance, there is a folder like that in a drawer somewhere, one you have probably never read. Later in this video, I will show you a woman who trusted a folder exactly like it, and what she got back decades later on the day it was supposed to matter most. I want to be careful here because this is not a joke, and grief is not a punchline. The reason any of this is worth understanding is simple. A funeral is one of the only major purchases you will ever make while in shock, on a deadline, and too heartbroken to shop around. That is exactly why, back in 1984, the government wrote a special rule just to protect families in that moment. And it is also why the business behind the sad music and the soft carpet is far more calculated than it looks. Because a funeral home is not really one business. It is three stacked on top of a grieving family. And by the end of this video, you will see all three, and you will know your rights inside every single one of them. Not to make you cynical, to make sure that on the day you least want to be thinking clearly, a part of you already is. Start with the thing sitting right in front of you in the room. The casket. It feels disrespectful to think of it as a product, and that feeling is precisely what is being counted on. Consumer Reports once put a real number on this. A modest casket sitting on the showroom floor for around $3,400 had cost the funeral home only about $800 to buy. That is a markup of more than 300%, and in this industry that is normal. The rule of thumb is 3 to 5 times the wholesale cost, and sometimes far more. And the room it is sold in is designed as carefully as the casket. Studies of how people shop in that room find that most grieving families buy one of the first 3 caskets they are shown, and usually the middle one of the 3. So the display is arranged around the price they would like you to land on, with a cheaper option nearby that is quietly made to look like the sad, thin, disrespectful choice. But here is the single most useful thing you will learn today, and almost nobody knows it. That 1984 rule, the funeral rule, gives you the legal right to buy the casket somewhere else. You can order one online, from Costco, from Walmart, from a company like Titan Casket, often for under $1,000, have it shipped straight to the funeral home, and the home is legally forbidden from refusing it or charging you a single dollar in handling fees. The same rule gives you more power than that. They have to hand you an itemized price list before they show you anything. They have to quote prices over the phone if you call, and they have to tell you in writing that embalming is almost never actually required by law. They rarely volunteer any of this. The most emotional purchase in the building is also the one you are most free to walk away from. And when a home breaks that rule, it is not a theory. A family funeral home in Brooklyn, Andrew Torregrossa and Sons, told grieving customers more than once that it simply would not perform the funeral unless they bought the casket from the home. In 2012, the government took it to court in what the agency called the first case of its kind, and the home agreed to pay a $32,000 penalty. And this was not a one-off. In 2023, the Federal Trade Commission did something it had never done before. It called 278 funeral homes around the country, posing as ordinary customers, just to see what they would say. It ended up warning 39 of them. Some refused to give any prices at all. Some quoted different prices on different calls for the same service. And some told callers the law required embalming when it does not. There is one more upsell to know about before we leave the building because it is the bridge to the next business, the vault. When you buy a burial plot, you will be shown a heavy, protective, sealed vault, often for a few $1,000s, described as a way to shield the casket from the earth. What they are far less likely to mention is that most cemeteries only require a plain concrete liner, which can cost a fraction of that, and that no state law requires the expensive sealed version at all. And the quiet truth underneath all of it, according to consumer advocates, is that nothing the funeral industry sells to you actually preserves a body. Which raises the obvious question. If the merchandise is not really where the money lives, where does it? To find that, you have to walk outside past the building entirely to the land. The cemetery. We think of a cemetery as sacred ground, and it is. But to the company that owns it, it is also some of the most quietly profitable real estate in the world, because it is sold the same piece of land over and over by the square foot. A single acre can hold around 1,000 graves, and each of those small plots can sell for thousands of dollars on its own. At one famous cemetery in Brooklyn, a single grave runs from about $21,000 to over $40,000, and the price is literally set and approved by a state board. Stack the mausoleum crypts on top, sell the little niches in the wall for the urns, and you are selling the air above the ground and the walls beside it. And here is the fact that reframes the whole industry. At the largest company in this business, the cemetery brings in about $500 million less than the funerals do, and yet it earns more actual profit. Around 34 cents of profit on every dollar of land, against roughly 20 on every dollar of service. Selling the land beats selling the goodbye, and it gets stranger because of a quiet accounting rule. When you buy a plot in advance, the company is allowed to record that sale and the profit as soon as you have paid about 1/10 of it and the ground is ready, long before anyone has died. But a prepaid funeral is treated the opposite way. It sits on the books as a debt they owe you, waiting until the day of the service. And that prepaid money is the second engine here, and the most emotional one. It is called preneed. Think of it as an IOU that runs in reverse. You pay in full today, and they do not owe you the actual funeral for years, sometimes decades. You buy your own funeral in advance to spare your family the burden, which is a genuinely kind and responsible thing to do. But watch what it does for the company. It takes your cash today and does not have to deliver anything for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years. That one giant company is sitting on a backlog of around $17 billion of funerals that are already sold and paid for, but not yet delivered. It is an enormous pool of your money, invested, earning for them, quietly waiting for you to die, which is why the most important question about a prepaid funeral is not the price. It is where the money actually goes. And to understand why that question matters so much, you have to hear what happened when it went to the wrong place. There was a company called National Prearranged Services. It sold prepaid funerals to families all across the country, and it promised over and over that their money was sitting safely in trust waiting for them. It was not. For roughly 16 years, prosecutors later showed it was run like a Ponzi scheme. The money that was supposed to be untouchable was funneled into risky bets and into the operator's own pockets, and new customers' payments were used to cover the old ones. When it finally collapsed, more than 97,000 people had been affected, and hundreds of millions of dollars were simply gone. The founder, a lawyer named Doug Cassidy, was sentenced to nearly 10 years in prison, and the courts ordered $435 million in restitution. But the number that stays with you is a smaller one. A woman in Missouri named Dolores Evans paid $800 into her plan in 1999, back when a funeral cost around $6,000. She did the responsible thing. She planned ahead so her family would not have to. 26 years later, she finally received her check from the wreckage of that company. It was for $599.11. What failed those families was not foresight. It was where the money was allowed to sit. So if you take one thing from this section, let it be this. Prepaying can be genuinely smart. But before you do, ask the plain questions. Is the money in a real separate trust? Does the plan still work if you move to another state? And what happens if you ever need to cancel? A good provider will answer all three without flinching. Which brings us to the strangest part of the whole story. Because the casket, the cemetery, and the prepaid plan may all be run by a company whose name you have never once seen. Meet Service Corporation International. And to understand it, you have to go back to one man, who quietly invented the exact trick that later convinced you your local funeral home was still local. It started in 1962 in Houston, Texas. Robert Waltrip was a third-generation funeral director. His father had run a funeral home in the Houston Heights, and Waltrip grew up in it. But the son had a different idea, and it was a simple one. Instead of running each funeral home as its own little island, buying its own hearse, keeping its own staff, what if a group of homes in the same city could quietly share the expensive parts? One set of vehicles, one preparation team, one back office serving all of them. He called the idea clusters, and it turned a business of sleepy local shops into something that could be scaled and bought and rolled up one town at a time. So that is what he did. He took the company public and then he started buying. He bought the wreckage of his largest bankrupt rival. He bought the second biggest chain in the country. Name by name, home by home, until today that one company owns close to 1,500 funeral homes and 500 cemeteries across 44 states, taking in over $4 billion a year and worth around $10 billion. It is by a wide margin the largest funeral operator in North America, and you would almost never know it because here is the genius of it. When it buys the beloved local home that a family ran for 100 years, it keeps the family name, it keeps the old sign, and it often keeps the very same staff, so that everything looks exactly as local and personal as it always did. The one brand that quietly ties them all together, a name called Dignity Memorial, is something most families never even notice. This is the whole machine. A retail counter, a real estate fund, and a roll-up, all wearing the face of a trusted neighbor. So what could actually change a machine this well built? There is one force reshaping the entire industry right now, and it is simply a change in what families choose: cremation. It is now how the clear majority of Americans are laid to rest, more than 63%, and it is climbing toward 80% within a couple of decades, driven by a quiet fact. The share of Americans with no religious affiliation has jumped from about 16% to nearly 30% in a single generation. And cremation threatens the whole model because it strips out the two most profitable parts: no expensive casket to mark up, no burial plot to sell. A direct cremation can cost a few hundred to a couple of $1,000s instead of 10. But watch how the machine adapts. The giant company simply went out and bought the biggest cremation brands too, so it wins either way. Its own cremation rate is already around 65%. The preneed billions are already collected. The cemetery land only grows more scarce, and the family name stays trusted on the sign. And to be fair, bigness here is not all villainy, and I want to steelman the other side honestly. A national company can staff around the clock, absorb a brutal flu season that would overwhelm a single small home, and keep a beloved local home open when the family that ran it has no one left to take it over. At its best, a prepaid plan genuinely does lock in today's price against decades of inflation, and some of that markup pays for real, around-the-clock, deeply human work, done by people doing a job most of us could never do. The honest complaint is not that they make a profit. It is that you are so rarely told who they are. It is worth adding that one consumer watchdog survey found the big chains' prices ran as much as 70% higher than nearby independents, though the company disputes how that was measured. The business was built to survive almost anything, except an informed customer. So here is the only thing I actually want you to take from this. Not fear and not cynicism, but a little bit of quiet power, for a day you hope is very far away. You now know that the local name may not be local. You know that the casket can be bought anywhere with no penalty, and that embalming is almost never required. You know that the ground is sold by the square foot, and that the kindest sounding option, prepaying, hands them your money for decades, so you had better ask where it sits. So here are the honest questions I will leave you with. Has your family already prepaid a funeral? Do you actually know where that money is sitting tonight? Or would you be finding out for the very first time on the worst day of your life? And when that day does come, will you let the grief make the decisions? Or will you remember that even here, especially here, you have every right to ask exactly what you are paying for? So go and check. Ask the plain questions while it is still just a conversation and not a crisis. Then come back and tell me what you found. I genuinely want to know.